Field Trips features real field stories told by real ASCE members.
I still remember Hurricane Maria very well. When Hurricane Maria entered the Caribbean Sea, it was huge. It was very well formed. And I had hope. So I tracked the Weather Channel pretty much every day. And I had that hope last day, like maybe it's going to turn more south because it's looking for more warm waters. But it was approaching to Puerto Rico very fast. So I text my sister and I told her I love her and I hope she's in a safety place. And I called my family in Mayagüez, and I told her I hope they have enough supplies and I love them. And then talk to you soon. And I hope that talk to you soon was like a few days, but actually it took me 3 weeks until I received the first text message from my sister to tell me she was fine. Then took me around 2 months until I was able to reach my family in Mayagüez, and they told me, we are fine, we survive. Then took me 6 months until I was able to visit the island. I saw the struggle. It was not very well recovered. And, but I was ready to help. But what I really found was the post-trauma stress in my family, with my friends, with my colleagues, where everybody really want to tell me what happened. You know, what happened to them, where they spent the hurricane, how disoriented they were. And those stories really hurt my heart because they were really sad, really sad. And I was there holding my tears pretty much, and a lot of stories. But at the end, I saw the resilience of Puerto Ricans, where they cleaned their roads, they took care of their communities, they make sure the next door have enough food, water to drink, and definitely Hurricane Maria marks a before and after, because in all our conversations we need to refer like this was before Maria or after Maria.
Hello, my name is Guzman. I am a professor from the New York City College of Technology in Brooklyn, New York, and this is my ASCE field trip story. Back in 2018, when Hurricane Maria hit the island of Puerto Rico, I was, as many other the Puerto Rican diaspora here in the United States, I feel a sense of sadness and to a great extent of helplessness. Sadness for my beautiful country that is being torn down by this natural force, for my family and friends that were still in Puerto Rico and had to go through that and the aftermath, and helplessness from the standpoint of a professional. As a civil engineer, we have certain skills that were needed during and after the hurricane. And being in the United States with limited communication and no ability to travel to Puerto Rico, it was quite overwhelming. I remember that besides being able to, help with gathering water and supplies, I posted several things in social media from the standpoint of an engineer that, stay in your houses, don't go around, don't go sightseeing of the destruction because of the potential for landslide after an event like that. So, but besides that, I was not able to help from a professional standpoint. However, as luck would have it, a couple months later, I was contacted by the provost of the university, and I was offered to be the liaison for a new program where we were going to send student volunteers to Puerto Rico to help with the recovery. This was a New York State sponsored program called New York State Stands with Puerto Rico on a Recovery Effort, sponsored by then Governor Cuomo, and it had the intention of sending 500 students, 250 from the City University of New York, CUNY, and 250 from the State University of New York, SUNY. And within that program, students will be sent to the island in 2-week intervals to help with the recovery, basically boots on the ground, hammer in hand type of work. They would receive a stipend for their efforts. They would also receive, if they participated in a course that helped them reflect in their experience, they would also gain 3 credits towards their degree. I was contacted to be the liaison for my campus, and because it was such a short timeline, to give an idea, this was at the end of April. During the end of April after the hurricanes, when they contacted me for the first time, and by the time that a month later, around May 20th, we had already selected the candidates, and a month later, by June 16 or 17, the students would be traveling, would start their travels. So it was a very short schedule, so we didn't have high expectations because of the turnaround. But at the end, the students did show up. The provost, I remember, telling me, hey, if we can get 35 student volunteers, we're in good shape. At the end of my campus alone, we got 186 students apply for the program. CUNY-wide, this is not even considering SUNY, CUNY-wide, there was in excess of 2,800 student volunteers that applied. So there was somehow rigorous, even though with a short period of time, interview process, and students were selected and trained, and by June 16, 17, they were already on planes. So students, I also helped with creating a course so that students that were in technical fields like engineering could reflect from a standpoint of engineering in the infrastructure and of the island, and their learnings from being on site. Next, I'm going to show you some of the pictures that they sent back, and but before, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my own experience in Puerto Rico. When I was able to travel in Puerto Rico, let's say 4 or 5 months after the hurricane, I remember being on the plane. I was it was a very sunny day, and I was on the plane sitting on the window, and I start seeing Puerto Rico in the horizon, and the first thing that I noticed was the green was not there. There's a lot of areas that were still brown from the destruction, the decaying plant life, and but eventually I start seeing what resembles towns, and one of the first things I saw was actually something that I thought was beautiful. I wonder where all of these spots are in the communities, right? These blue, very blue, bright blue spots, and as we got closer, and unfortunately, it was not a pretty sight. It was what was happening was this. This is a picture that I took from the plane, and this is in the area of Puerto Rico, where supposedly the materials and the help would get there quicker. And this is 4 or 5 months, and all you could see, all these blue spots are the blue tarps that people are still living under. So if you've ever been to Puerto Rico or the Caribbean, it is a warm and humid place. Imagine having to spend it day in, day out with probably no electricity and in the heat under these tarps. So you can imagine the people that were living there going through some very tough times. Well, it turns out that my students some of my students eventually ended up working in these areas. This is an area of Santurce, and this is some of the pictures that they shared with me. You'll see right away, their first thing they were doing was working with fixing roofs, and they did many roofs by the time that the program was done. But you can see here houses that were completely without a roof, and by working alongside with non-for-profits that were on the island, students were able to help. You see, this is a picture from a student, Juan Camilo Rincon. You can see here another student is in a second-story building that they were able to make a roof that was strong enough to support all those students. So these are roofs that are engineered. They might be from lightweight and inexpensive materials, but they're engineered to resist the next hurricane that comes by. So this at the end gives me a happy face. My students were able to help in the places they were sent. You can see here student Jeffrey Giamidi. I'm sorry. He shared about having to improvise. Just something as simple as carrying, the construction materials around became a source of innovation. Right now, here, let's take advantage of having this cart, and so we can wheel around our materials. Other students were sent to the island, and I have a student here, Valentin Ramirez. He has since graduated. He works now in the department. Besides his full-time job, he works also in the department in the laboratories. And he arrived. He worked the entire 2 weeks in one house. And in this house, they basically, when they arrived, the house was just a slab and the foundations. It's the old lady that lived in this house. And by the time that he left 2 weeks later, he had completed the shell of the house. And I still think to myself, look, I've been in engineering. I was in practice for a long time in consulting. And now from the professional standpoint, I've never had the chance to actually build a full house with my own hands. And my students were able to do that. It's an incredible lesson. It's an incredible experience. That and also the contacts they made, the friendships they made with the people on the island, the people that they traveled with. Many of these students I know personally. This is some of the pictures they shared. During that time, some of my students were there when Governor Cuomo was going around, and they actually were able to be in that photo opportunity with him, which is something always nice. So at the end, I don't know if there's really a lesson here. If it's a lesson in patience, that if you are willing to help, that the help is needed, and you will be able to do your part, or that maybe me as an educator now in academia, that my job is making sure that I prepare people to be able to help, and in that sense, I was able to do my part for my island that I love. Thank you for this opportunity, and have a good day.
Hi, my name is Natasha Mejias. I work as a staff engineer at a local geotechnical engineering company here in Puerto Rico, while also pursuing my master's degree in geotechnical engineering too. I graduated a year ago for my bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And when Hurricane Maria passed, I was a student. I was starting my second year of college, halfway through the first semester. And by that time, I remember that I was living with my parents, and their house is located on the west side of the island and the countryside, and the borderline between three municipalities, which are Las Marias, Mayagüez, and Añasco. And I say this because for those of you who don't know, that area is very country-like. And so when the hurricane passed, that I can remember, one of the first things that shocked us was the next day waking up, the house was filled with water. Not flooded, but everything was wet, and there was water all over the floor. And I remember when we got outside of our house, that first sight of what the hurricane had done was very incredible. All of the trees were on the ground, electric poles. We could see the other houses and the other mountains far away that we couldn't see before. And we also saw a lot of neighbors who lost their roofs, their houses, everything that they own. It was a really tough day. We also found out that we were stuck at our neighborhood because the roads were all closed, either with landslides, electric poles on the ground, trees. And so that first day, our community gathered up quickly. We made brigades and they started opening up the main road of the neighborhood. But then we found out that the other bigger routes to get to the municipalities were blocked by things that we couldn't move. So we were stuck at our neighborhood for approximately 2.5 days, if I can remember correctly. And through those days, we saw people coming from the urban areas by foot all the way to the countryside because they needed to see if their families were okay, if their friends were okay. And it's a long route, you know, and by foot, we were amazed that they were walking from the urban areas to the countryside. But I mean, they were desperate and we get it. So through those days, we just offered them water or whatever they needed that we could give them. And then when we finally were able to move, get out, get supplies, we visited for the first time in those few days the urban area of Mayagüez. We had to go through Añasco first and Las Marias because those were the routes that were open first, not the one that got us straight to Mayagüez. And we saw how El Rio Grande de Añasco, which is the big river in the Añasco area, flooded an entire community, and you could see the watermarks on the houses and everything that people lost. And then when we got to Mayagüez and we saw the disaster in the urban area, which was more like a lot of infrastructure destroyed, concrete poles on the ground, similar to the countryside but less vegetation, more construction materials on the ground. And we could also see the desperation in people trying to get supplies, trying to get a signal on their cell phone because we had no communication lines available. And it was really tough to see all of that. And I remember also that being on the west side itself was a struggle because all of the first response and big medical areas and help was located and is still located on the metropolitan area. So without having accessible roads and the loss of communication, I remember it was hard for the west side to receive that first aid that we needed in comparison with other municipalities that are closer to the metropolitan area. And then on top of that, to start a university a couple months later, still with no electricity, no water, no signal, it was tough. And then hearing all of the stories from your fellow colleagues and other students, it was really hard to take into. So yeah, Hurricane Maria left us very, very weakened as an island. You know, our infrastructure is still recovering. We still have a weak electrical system, and things that were happening before got worse, and things that weren't happening before then started happening, other problems. And so yeah, it was hard for everyone, I'm sure about that. But that was my experience in a nutshell, because I could be talking here for a while. And the videos that you will see are basically snapshots from the next day, from my neighborhood, in general, what we saw, the trees on the ground, etc. So yeah, that was my experience. Thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Daniel Pradel. I'm a professor at Ohio State University, and I was part of the GEAR team that visited Puerto Rico shortly after Hurricane Maria. And I wanted to show you some of the impressions from that visit, and I have a few pictures to share with you. So the first thing that I was struck by was how beautiful Puerto Rico was, and also how spread the population was located. This was my first trip to Puerto Rico, and I did not have an idea of how much mountains and hillsides were present on the island. The second thing that we struggled with was, because of the mountainous nature, it was sometimes very, very hard to get to locations. In some places, we literally had to crawl under rocks to follow water mains and access areas where the hurricane had caused damage. The number of landslides that occurred during Hurricane Maria was also astonishing. And unfortunately, they created all sorts of logistic problems for the team because many roads were closed. And for the population, losing roads is not just losing access, but you have water mains, electric lines, and many other utilities that are located on the streets that were destroyed, and therefore they didn't have access to phone and electricity and drinking water in many areas. And as we traveled through the island, this was a picture that we saw again and again. And these landslides were not small, as you can see here in this picture. That person there is me on the street. As I mentioned, transportation was severely impacted, and it was not only landslides that took roads, but it was landslide that buried portions of the roads. And I think in total, over 50,000 landslides were mapped, which is incredible for an island of this magnitude. The other thing that happened is that many roads were washed away or severely impacted. The problem when you have utility lines that are damaged is that local inhabitants, especially when they're so spread throughout the island, no longer have access to drinking water. And it's not easy for somebody in the middle of the island to drive 2 hours to San Juan just to get a few gallons of water for their family. So in many areas, we saw people tapping into groundwater sources and, for example, along the road, having to take the water for drinking, washing, whatever else, or sometimes just washing and their dishes or their clothes because they didn't have any other access. One of the sites where we spend a lot of time, the team, and one of the main reasons why I joined the GEAR team was to look at dams, and in particularly look at Oaxaca Dam. This was a dam built in the 1920s that had a height of about 121 feet at the highest and held a reservoir of 30,000 acre feet of water. This was in the news, and you may remember it because it prompted the evacuation of a total of 70,000 residents downstream of the dam. The site was immediately, they started working, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was there trying to lower the reservoir with pumps. But one thing that struck us in the early pictures from the site was the number of locations where sand boils had developed in the downstream part of the dam. suggesting that they may have been the beginnings or a certain amount of internal erosion had occurred, and some of the particles had washed with the water. And one thing that we also saw was how severely impacted the spillway at Oaxaca Dam. And in this location here, documents show that an ancient landslide was located. Overall, I was amazed by the resilience and the kindness of the Puerto Rico population. I remember people offering us food, feeding us when it was very clear that it was difficult for them to be able to get food, get to supermarkets, get drinking water, but they saw us working as part of the GEAR team, and they wanted to help us and contribute. And I'll never forget how kind the local population was. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this video.
Field Trips is a production of ASCE and the Geo-Institute.